Today we're going to show you how to level, fill and ganache a cake. Now we'll tell you a little bit about the baking first. We bake our cakes one mix in 2 tins, and we do that so it doesn't dry out around the edge. That means that we don't have to trim off the outer edge after we've leveled and filled and stacked our cake ready to go. So we're going to level it with a cake level, and it's just about organising the right height for the cake itself. So move your little guards on the sides. If you don't have a cake level and you do a fair bit of cake decorating, they're not expensive, so I do recommend that you get one. So you just saw the top off the cake, and we'll do that on the next cake as well. Now we're just going to show you a method that we use to maximise the height of our cake and reduce the cake wastage. So basically what we do is we've got our cake here that we've levelled. It's not completely levelled right down to the edge, so it's completely flat there, but that's okay. So what we're going to do is get a little bit of ganache. You'll find a link below of where you can buy ganache already made. So we just put a little bit of ganache around the edge, and a little bit of the cake top that we just took off the centre here, we can just run around and stick to the ganache. Like I said, you don't have to do this, but you do get extra height out of your cake if you do. If you don't do it, you will have leftover cake top, which isn't a problem. You can make truffles with it. We've got a link below for how to make the truffles, and oh, they are so yummy. It's very, very easy, and you will most probably already have, if you've done this cake, already have everything you need to actually make it. So once we've applied the extra cake around the edge, our aim is to make sure the cake is level here and almost square on the edges. So I've got the cake board here. This is an 8-inch setup board, or they sometimes call them STD boards. And that's an 8-inch cake. What you'll find is our 8-inch cakes are slightly smaller than the setup board, which is fantastic, because we use a brand of cake tin called a Cecil tin. It's an Australian made tin. If you'd like to see a link for that on where to purchase those, you'll find that below as well. Now the reason why we do that is when we put the cake onto the setup board, what we like to do is have a little area between where the cake actually finishes and where the edge of the board is. I'll show you what I mean. Once we've centered the cake, you'll see when you have a really close look that there's a gap between where the edge of the cake is and where the board starts. We want that to be like that, and the reason why is because we're going to cover the whole cake in a minute with ganache, and we're going to smooth it back, and if we keep bumping into cake, it doesn't work well. If you don't use the Cecil tins, you'll just have to trim down the edge of your cakes. Now we're going to put another lot of ganache in the middle because let's face it, chocolate's fabulous. I love it. Admittedly, I'm a chocoholic. I absolutely love it. Now people often ask how thick should your chocolate be? Oh, anything between 2 and 5 mil depending on how much you like. Then we just get the other cake and we put it on top. Make sure you peel off your papers. Don't get it together and go, oh no, I've left the paper on. And we're just going to sit the cake on a mat. You don't have to put it on a mat. I just find it easier because if I don't put it on a mat, I end up getting ganache all over the counter. So now is when you want to have a close look at your cake and make sure that it is actually centered. It appears to me that it is. And now we can actually start applying the ganache around the edge. If you are actually doing multiple tiers and it's a skinny cake, then I would recommend that after you stack all your cakes and you've checked to make sure it is in the center, that you put some skewers through it and sit it in the fridge. The reason why I suggest you put skewers through them is so the cake doesn't move between your counter and the fridge, because believe it or not, that does happen if the ganache is soft or if it's a warm day. but we're ready to go. And it also helps if your cakes are cold because the ganache starts to set faster. So now all we're going to do is apply a thick layer of ganache around the outside of the cake. Now that we've got ganache around the edge of the cake and it's out past the silver board, I've just got a ganaching tool here and some boiling water. Tap water is not going to be hot enough. You're going to need boiling water and a sponge. Now what we do, I'm left-handed so I apologise for that, so just mirror image this. What we do is we get the ganaching tool, which is quite hot, tap it on the sponge to remove excess water, scrape around the edge of the cake, and then scrape the excess into a jug or a bowl. Okay, so turn as you go, making sure that when you're doing the scraping, your ganaching tool is flat to the counter, it's up against the side of the cake, and it's at a 45-degree angle here to the edge of the cake. If you scrape around your cake like that at a 90-degree angle, what will happen is you'll get all these jumpy up and down vertical lines around the edge of the cake, and it doesn't look good. And when you apply your fondant, you can see all those lines, so you want to avoid that. So you just scrape around the edge and scrape the excess into the bowl. Now when you're putting the ganache on, you're thinking to yourself, and I do every time, I've been cake decorating for years, and I say to myself, that's a lot of ganache. But you know, you scrape half of it off, so it doesn't matter. So you're using the silver setup board that your cake is sitting on as a guideline. You're scraping back to that. Now, if you make a mistake or you scrape your cake back and it's kind of pyramid-ish shaped, and you go, oh, that's no good, you can actually just apply more ganache and just scrape around again. It's not a problem. Okay, so now that I've got that scraped, the bulk of it off around the edge of the cake, what I'm going to do is apply some ganache to the top. Now, when you leveled and filled your cake, if by some minute chance you look at your cake and you go, oh geez, you know, that cake isn't level, now's the time to fix it. So if hypothetically saying that this side was lower than that side, just add a little bit more ganache, and when you level the top of the cake, then nobody will know. Now I'm going to get a really long, 30 centimetre long flat spatula and scrape along the top of that, and the spatula is going to come fresh from underneath the hot water. So it will make that glassy smooth. And then turn it and do it the other way. Okay. Now you just want to scrape around the edge of your cake one more time to create a nice little ridge here. Oh, have a look here. I've scraped all the way through to the cake. I'll just pop a little bit more ganache on there. And I'll scrape it round. And hopefully we'll be able to hide my mistake. If by some chance when you scrape around you didn't put enough ganache on and you find a little hole, I've got one there, you can just add more and scrape it again. You can do this on a turntable. My turntable's a little bit fast, so I can't do it on my turntable. As you can see, the cake has a little ridge here. Now what we're going to do is pop the cake in the fridge, and when the ganache goes really hard, with a hot spatula, we're going to cut this off, and then you'll have lovely square edges. Now that the cake has been set in the fridge and the ridge here is hard, what we're actually going to do with a hot spatula, we're going to swipe the spatula towards ourselves to cut the edge off. Each time you cut through, pull the chocolate off and cut through again with the hot spatula. Trying to keep it level with the top of the cake, that's really important. What you don't want to do is you don't want to pull it towards yourself on the edge here because then you'll rip off the side of the cake. If you work on the opposite side and work your way in, you'll have more success. Now that you've got the bulk of it off, as you can see, there's a tiny little divot, we'll call it a divot, a tiny little divot just here on the cake and a tiny little ridge there. So what we're going to do is just run the spatula, working its way in along the top of the cake there until it is completely flat. Now, if you've got an area which just isn't going to get flat no matter what you do, get a little bit of this softened ganache and pop it in that divot. And then just run the spatula that's hot back over the top of the cake. And turn as you go. Now you will have a little bit of chocolate that goes over the edge here. I'm going to show you in a minute how to fix that. Now once we've got all the top cut off here, the high edge, and we've also filled any divots, what we're going to do is wipe around the edge of the cake and wipe up any of the ganache that has slidden either out or down, all the way around with a hot spatula. Now if you look very closely here, you'll see a tiny little ridge. Heat up the spatula again, it's really important that it's hot. And tap it on the sponge so you get the excess water off, and just wipe the spatula in towards the center of the cake. And like I said, turn as you go. Your cake is now ready to be covered with fondant. Thanks for watching. If you found this video to be helpful, share it with your friends and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Click on the notification bell to make sure you don't miss any upcoming videos. Happy decorating!